And that's carried. Okay. Does anyone have a member Johnson?
No, I don't, but I think we should be deciding on who will be the vice chair this meeting, since you are now in the chair position. So I would at this time nominate Member Steele to be the vice chair for the meeting. You've been voluntold.
Okay, then do we have to vote on? Do we have a seconder for that? Member Metcalf. All those in favor? Any against? And that's carried. Thank you. Yes, Member Foster.
Thank you. A couple of us are trying to get logged in to the Wi-Fi. Can we have the password that we need for guest, I guess it is?
Balls falls 1.
Little letter?
Is that all lowercase?
All lowercase.
There you go.
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay.
Given that this is probably a new experience for most of our board members.
Okay, gladly. Through you, Madam Chair. So the Source Protection Authority, we'll start with Source Protection Authority. That is made up of the NPCA board. By law, under the Clean Water Act, you guys are the Source Protection Authority. And then from that, there's the Source Protection Committee, which is appointed by the Source Protection Authority. It consists of 9 members. 3 members are municipal representatives, 3 members are public at large, and 3 members are sector representatives, 1 for agricultural, 1 for industrial, and then 1 for commercial. And then we also have a chair, which is Ms. Maria Bellantino-Perco, and she is appointed by the province. And then we also have liaisons. We have a Source Protection Authority liaison, Public Health liaison, and a Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Parks liaison as well.
Please proceed with your presentation.
Okay. Okay, good morning. Sorry about that. So this presentation is for the report that you have before you, SPA 0519, and essentially it's a summary of the Source Protection Authority's reporting requirements under the Clean Water Act for implementation of the Source Protection Plan. So the Source Protection Authority is required to prepare an annual report that describes the measures taken to implement the Source Protection Plan, including results of any monitoring programs and the extent to which the Source Protection Plan objectives have been achieved. This year's reporting is slightly different from previous years in that most of it was completed using the ministry-provided online reporting tool. The tool was used to answer the annual progress report implementation questions in an online format. The questions are then compiled into 3 program-generated reports. The last Excel document, which you have, was added to address certain reporting questions that couldn't be included in the online reporting tool. So under Section 46 of the Clean Water Act, annually we must prepare a report to be submitted to the Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Parks, and that's a deadline of May 1st of this year. And this summarizes the 2018 achievements of the Source Protection Plan implementation. So what you have before you is 4 documents. You have the Source Protection Annual Progress Report. This is a public distribution document, so this is what will be posted on our website, and this is what the public will see about the status of 2018 Source Protection Plan implementation. the Source Protection Annual Report 2018 Policy Implementation Status Report. So this describes the implementation status of all of the source protection policies. And in Niagara, we're very fortunate. We have all of our policies are implemented, which is not the case in other source protection regions. So we're doing really well here. Source Protection Annual Report 2018 Supplemental Form. So this is the details. This is really where you get into what was done in the previous year for source protection planning. And then finally is the Excel workbook. So these are just additional questions related to annual progress report achievements. So I have to also make a note. The ministry actually sent out an email on Monday where they included essentially their reporting tool that they provided to us wasn't ready in time for me to provide everything that's actually going to the ministry. So the implementation status report has been updated. There was a missing policy in there. It's now added, which will be submitted. But again, there's no really change. It's implemented. We're in good shape. And then there's also an implementation status summary, which shows you the percentages of all the policies we have and how many of them are implemented. And in our case, we're at 100%. And that kind of, that's spoken to in the the Excel document as well. So as a reminder, here's a map of the Niagara Peninsula Source Protection Area, and all the zones that are highlighted, these are where source protection policies apply currently. These policies address significant drinking water threats and are reported on annually through this annual progress reporting. And the municipalities where these policies apply include Thorold, Niagara Falls, Port Colborne, and Welland. Here is a list of the implementers of the source protection plan policies that are required to report annually on the implementation of the specific policies that pertain to them. Specific attention should be given to the region, their risk management official. They produce an annual report on the actions as they pertain to Part 4 of the Clean Water Act. This report is not attached here today, but it informs the annual report documents before you. If there is interest, it can be found at the Source Protection Niagara website. So the Source Protection Authority guides and oversees the source protection plan and the program, but the majority of the implementers are the region of Niagara, cities of Thorold, Niagara Falls, Port Colborne, and Welland, Ministry of the Environment, Conservation and Parks, Ministry of Transportation, Ministry of Agricultural, Food and Rural Affairs, and the St. Lawrence Seaway. So after compiling the information provided from the implementers and producing the documents attached to this report, the results of the annual progress reporting was provided to the Source Protection Committee for their review and comment at their March 2019 meeting. And based on staff recommendation and their review of the content before you, the status of the annual progress reporting is progressing well on target. And the Source Protection Committee has been reviewed and approved by the committee at that March 2019 meeting. And this is the statement from the committee: based on the information provided and the majority of the threats have been addressed and all the policies are implemented. So therefore, the recommendation from staff is that the Source Protection Authority Board approve the annual progress reporting documents so that staff may submit the annual progress report before the deadline of May 1st. And also that the Source Protection Authority Board approve the posting of the annual progress report to the Niagara Peninsula Source Protection Area website. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Prox. Member Johnson?
Yep, thank you. And just, can I ask questions now about the report itself after hearing the presentation?
Yes,
Thank
please
you.
do so.
So, thank you very much for the presentation. If I read the presentation and read especially Appendix 4 correctly, there's still 9 outstanding threats to the water, drinking water threat, and they're all based on agriculture, if I'm reading that correctly. So in Hamilton, we have an Agricultural and Rural Affairs Committee. Does Niagara Haldeman have the same that you can present there as we've had the Hamilton Conservation Authority present to us?
So through you, Madam Chair, I actually don't know if there's a committee.
Okay.
I'm not sure, but the outstanding threats that you're referring to, essentially what's occurring there is there's an agreement in place with the landowner of the property where those threats
Right.
are occurring, but the landowner has agreed, they just hasn't signed it.
Right, okay.
So that's why we can't list it as the threats are, the landowner has agreed to mitigate the threats, but he hasn't
Right.
signed the documentation. And that's all under a risk management plan.
And that's existing landowners, that's not to say future landowners, you're going to go up against the same ones. So, again, Federation of Farmers, that's Ontario-wide, that's not even specific to municipalities. Is there a possibility of even just connecting with them so that you can also not only deal with existing farmers, but any potential new farmers coming on board?
Through you, Madam Chair, yes, that would all essentially, well, there's not going to be any new farmers because there might be when the zones change, and that's all going to be covered under the Section 36 plan update,
Right.
and that will go under very detailed public consultation, and every stakeholder that would be affected by the new policies as they come up would be contacted prior to them having the plan implemented. In the case we are right now, the only way a new farmer would be involved is if the property would be sold.
Right,
And so then if the new property owner would come in, they would need to be informed about all the policies that apply. And that would be done through, best management practices, and then the region would notify them. The real estate agent would have to be aware
Okay.
and all that.
so through you, Chair, just to be clear though, that all the 9 that are on your chart right now, as soon as they sign off on it, these farmers sign off on it, then this should all be zeros? Thank you.
Thank you, Member Johnston. Member Wright?
Just a quick comment as a source protection liaison. The agricultural rep on the source protection committee is an OFA representative elected by the OFA actually to be on the committee. So he's well connected with the farming community. Just maybe if it'll alleviate some of your fears that way. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Wright. Are there any other questions? Member Steele?
Thank you, Madam Chair. We do at the region have an agricultural committee because I do sit on it. And I'm just trying to look for the next meeting. So when I find that, I'll let you guys know. Okay, thanks.
Are there any other questions for the presenter? Member Metcalf?
Haldeman also has a agricultural committee as well, and I sit on that, and our next meeting is May 15th.
For clarification, if I can, Madam Chair, with advising the staff on the agricultural committee meetings of the municipalities, are you looking for staff to connect with those committees or provide information? Just a bit of clarification. I mean, I'm sure through you, Madam Chair, to Tom, that if you would like us to send information specifically to your advisory committees, we'd be pleased to do so. Correct.
Member Johnson?
Yep, thank you. Don't want to belabor this, but I can tell you, being on our agricultural and rural affairs, it's been very beneficial to have that connection with the conservation authorities. In Hamilton, obviously, it's Hamilton Conservation Authority for us, but that doesn't mean to say that this staff can't come. They come, they bring their presentation, they explain everything, who they are, so the farmers even know if they have a direct connection if they want to. I think it's just beneficial around.
So are we looking just to share information, or are we looking for a presentation? We could start with sharing the information.
I think it's
perhaps?
up to each committee. If they reach out to them and say, we would like to attend and would you like a presentation, leave
Okay.
it up to each committee to decide. But I think that connection is really important.
Member Steele?
So I'll put that recommendation forward that we have our staff connect with Haldeman and the Niagara Regional Agricultural Committees to ask them if they want to present at an upcoming meeting.
If I may, Madam Chair, so I agree, I would love to do that, but just for, I don't see much reason, no, I don't mean anything by it, but to go to Hamilton and Haldeman to speak on behalf of Niagara Peninsula Source Protection Authority policies, we don't have any that apply to Niagara and, in Haldeman and Hamilton at this point. So absolutely, I'll go to Niagara and present there. and as they apply to Niagara, but for Haldimand and Hamilton, I don't think there's much sense.
Are there any other questions? No? Okay, so at this time, moved by Member Height, seconded by Member Steele, that the Source Protection Authority receive report SPA-05-19 and the following documents for consideration. A, Source Protection Annual Progress Report. B, Source Water Protection Annual Report 2018 Policy Implementation Status. C, Source Water Protection Annual Report 2018 Supplemental Form. And D, 2018 Annual Progress Report for Source Protection Excel Workbook. That the Source Protection Authority approve that the aforementioned documents be submitted to the Ministry of the Environment, Conservation and Parks to meet the legislated reporting requirements. And 3, that the Source Protection Annual Progress Report be posted on the Niagara Peninsula Source Protection Area website. All those in favor? Any opposed? And that's carried. So are there any further business arising from the minutes? Oh, sorry. So I have a motion moved by Member Encina, seconded by Member Steele, that the Source Protection Authority minutes from the meeting of February 20th, 2019 be approved. All those in favor? Any opposed? And that's carried. All right. So item 5.1.1, response to the February 2019 Source Protection Authority questions report number SPA-04-19. Is there any discussion or questions on this item? None? Okay, so then I have a motion moved by Member Encina, seconded by Member Steele, that report SPA-04-19, response to February 2019 Source Protection Authority questions be received. All those in favor? Any opposed? And that's carried. Is there any new business? I see none.
Madam Chair, if I just could, I would like to extend to Maria, the chair of the SPC, and to Tom, our deepest appreciation. The heavy lifting that has to be done by the Source Protection Committee on preparing all of this information is quite remarkable. And you've done an amazing job. You've been one of the first to get some of your reports in to the minister, and I know that you're very, very proud of that accomplishment over the last number of years. So, Madam Chair, I just wanted to indicate that you here right now are the board, but the real heavy lifting is done by the citizen appointees and the members on the SPC and the staff.
Yes, and thank you very much for being here today in your presentation. So at this point, I would like to adjourn. I have a motion from Member Height, seconded by Member Steele, that the Source Protection Authority meeting be adjourned. All those in favor? I missed an important part of that. Is there any opposed? And that is carried. On to the next one. So the full authority meeting. I guess we'll start with adoption of the agenda. We'll be adding an item to the agenda. There's a motion moved by Member Foster, seconded by Member Height, that the following be added to the agenda as item 4.3.4, correspondence dated April the 12th from 2019 from the Ministry of Natural Resources and Forestry regarding notification of the 2019-2020 transfer payment funding. All those in favor? Any opposed? One opposed, and that, you don't like the number? And that's carried. And to adopt the agenda, I have a motion from Member Height, seconded by Member Foster, that the agenda be adopted as amended. All those in favor? Any opposed? And that is carried.
Madam Chair, just in terms of some logistics, this may be a procedure that's somewhat new to the Authority Board, but item number 4.1.2, staff believe that we do need minutes of our closed session meetings. So the minutes of the closed session meeting, March 20th, are included in this package in front of you, which is your confidential minutes. However, those minutes do need to be approved in open session. So when you get to item 4.1.2, we would just ask you to refer to the closed session minutes in your package and make sure that you are comfortable with them before you deal with them in open session. Thank you, Madam Chair.
At this time, I'd like to ask if anyone will be making a declaration of conflict of interest. And I see none.
Just him.
Okay. And we do have one presentation, the Kpmg audit report, and the presentation will be made by Scott Plugers. So I'd like to invite Mr. Plugers up. Welcome.
Madam Chair, while our auditor is moving the podium again, I would just like to mention that we had the first meeting of the Audit and Budget Committee for the Authority on Monday, and our auditor did attend that meeting and go through the audited 2018 financial statements in detail. I just thought that the board would be interested in knowing that the committee has had a very thorough review of these. Thank you.
Okay. Good to go.
You please proceed.
For sure. Thank you. So what I will do this morning is just take you through a brief overview of the financial statements, a couple key highlights, as well as our audit findings report, and then certainly open it up to any questions. And if there's anything I don't touch on, just please feel free to let me know, and I'm happy to address that. Okay, so starting with the financial statements, we'll go through those first. The first 3 pages are the most important reason for receiving an audit, and that is the independent auditor's report. So this does look a little bit different than you might have seen in prior years with respect to audit reports, as this has changed. It's really just the format and the layout, but I will direct your attention to the first paragraph on page 2 of the audit report, where it says independent auditor's report and the subheading opinion. This is, of course, the most important point, being our opinion. And I'm happy to report this year for the 2018 year end, it is a clean audit opinion, or in other words, an unqualified audit opinion. Okay, so if we can start on page 5. This is the statement of financial position and summarizes your financial assets, financial liabilities, as well as your non-financial assets. Year over year with financial assets, a slight increase of about $1 million, $10.6 million compared with $9.6 million in the prior year. Financial liabilities actually a nice decrease to $3.3 million from $5.1 million in the prior year, for a net financial asset of $7.3 million in comparison with $4.5 million in the prior year. So certainly a positive reflection of the results, seeing that number increase there. With respect to non-financial assets, the biggest component there being your tangible capital assets, or items that are in use for longer than one period of time. You can see there $20,100,000 compared to $19,900,000. So not a significant change on a net basis, but certainly some movement within that number with respect to capital additions in the year. Overall, for an accumulated surplus of $27.5 million compared to $24.4 million in the prior year. On page 6 is the statement of operations. This summarizes the revenues and expenditures for the authority for the year. You can see 2018 total revenues $12.2 million compared with $12.5 million in the prior year. No real significant change or fluctuation in total revenues for the authority. Total expenditures have decreased considerably from $10.3 million down to $9.2 million in 2018, for a total annual surplus of $3 million in comparison with $2 million in the prior year. And just to reiterate, that $3 million is not necessarily true cash in the door. That's just a reflection of your financial accounting revenues net of expenses for the year. Okay. Page 7, this is the statement of changes in net financial assets. This really is an accountant statement, and I make that kind of joke all the time, but this really just does try to reconcile in a bit more detail for you the change in that net financial asset indicator that sits on the statement of financial position, which for any entities following public sector accounting standards is an important metric to consider, an important benchmark there. You can see it reconciles your annual surplus of $3 million to a change in net financial assets of $2.8 million, largely driven by the change in tangible capital assets. Okay. Page 8, this is the statement of cash flows. So the statement of cash flows, just when you're looking at the statement of cash flows, it's important to read these by its subtotals rather than some of the finer details that are in there. So you can see total annual surplus again, $3 million, but the actual net change in cash just from day-to-day operations of the authority is $3 million in comparison with $2.6 million in the prior year. So certainly another good strong indicator of just the cash generated from the authority to be able to fund and fund tangible capital assets and repay any debt or financing. So you can see a $3 million increase from operations, net of about $900,000 in tangible capital asset purchases, as well as a net move on investments of $177,000. And that last number down there is the repayment on long-term debt that the authority holds, $760,000, for an overall net increase in cash of $1.1 million. And just a reminder, this is a statement as at a point in time, so this does reflect the cash movement as at December 31st, 2018. The next several pages of the financial statements, I know as Gail mentioned, we did go through these in detail. These are the notes to the financial statements, certainly an integral part to any financial statements and should be read together with the actual financial statements themselves. I'm happy to answer any questions if there are, but I won't go through these in any significant detail.
Thank you very much for your presentation. Are there any questions for the presenter? None? Oh, I was going to say, Member Shurton.
Say I got it easy there.
I was going to be surprised about that.
Yeah, through the chair. I know this board, it was a little bit concerned about some previous things done by the term board of 2014 to 2018. Did you notice any discrepancies or things that you would like to comment on? Thanks.
So happy to highlight that as part of our audit findings report from a financial accounting, financial management, financial process point of view, which is the whole point of the financial statement audit. No concerns from our standpoint. That's definitely a governance side of things, but not really a financial statement impact per se.
Member Encina.
Thank you. Did you come across anything that would explain the, with regards to page 6 of the report, the expenses to CAO and administration, anything that would actually make the jump of over $500,000 in the CAO administration?
Sure. So if I can just add, and sometimes I get wordy, so I'll try and keep it brief, but with respect to expenditures for any public sector statements, these are by function for sure, okay. And then to be read together in conjunction with the segmented information, which is the last schedule, which breaks down, so for example, CAO and administration, watershed, and corporate resources, right. What services make that up. So if I can direct your attention, if anybody else is wondering as well, page 19, segmented information. So this note here actually isn't important. It's really a schedule, but it's a requirement under public sector accounting standards and breaks out now what you might traditionally see in financial statements in terms of salaries, rent, interest, amortization, contracted services, and so on. So these should be read together. From a pure audit standpoint, no real concern in the presentation in terms of where the geography is, in terms of where those land, whether CAO and administration versus watershed versus resources. But again, you can see in total actually the salaries, expenditure, materials and supplies, contracted services, and a bit more detail there. I don't know if that answers, but no, happy to give them more.
Through you, Chair, that's fine.
Okay.
But I just want to press upon it. This is the process you looked at. The process is fine.
For sure.
According to that.
Absolutely.
Okay, yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Encina. Are there any other questions? None? At this time, you can also ask questions on the audit findings report, which is item B.
Happy to go through this. If
you want to go through that?
Yeah, for sure. I'll take just a few moments quickly. We'll run through this, and then
sure.
Again, if there's any questions, please let me know. Okay, this is our annual audit findings report, which just highlights a couple key summaries, key findings, and as well some required communications under Canadian auditing standards that are required to be communicated to those charged with governance, which is of course the board. So I will start, I guess it's on page 22 or page 3, depending on how you're looking at it, but page 22 of the audit findings report, just to make sure everyone's there. Okay, there we go. So this is our executive summary. So pages 22 and 23 are the executive summary, just highlighting the purpose of the report and that there's been no changes from the audit plan that was communicated back in the fall with respect to our audit plan. We summarize a number of audit risks that we will touch on briefly, and as well adjustments and differences there, just noting the one uncorrected adjustment, but in our view is not material to the financial statements. Page 23, just briefly on finalizing the audit, you might notice the statements still say draft. The reason why is we are required to hold discussions with you this morning, as well as obtain your approval of the financial statements, update any legal confirmations as well. So just a few routine procedures that are always outstanding at this time of each and every audit with where we're at. And we will update you, of course, if there's anything that comes from those findings, but we're not anticipating those. With respect to independence, we have to communicate each year that we are independent with respect to the authority and the services that we do provide, and we certainly have the checks and balances, if you will, to make sure that we are independent with any services that we might provide. Okay. Page 24, just for your reference, materiality, which would have been communicated in the audit plan as well, but materiality for the year is set based on prior year total audited revenues of 12.5 million. The number of most importance or significance to you when looking at this is that last number down there of 12,500. What that number represents is that if we identify anything over and above that number that we believe is an adjustment, we will communicate that to management. We will recommend it to be corrected. It doesn't have to be corrected, but that is kind of our low threshold. So certainly while you see materiality of 250,000, that doesn't mean that that's what we consider an adjustment. You really have to look to that lower bottom number there. And again, materiality year over year is fairly consistent given the nature of the operations for the authority. Page 25, these are two required risks under Canadian auditing standards, the risk, fraud risk from revenue recognition and fraud risk of management override of controls. The fraud risk from revenue recognition can be rebutted, which in the case of the authority we have done so. Fraud risk from management override of controls cannot be rebutted in any audit. So certainly we have procedures to address that risk. Nothing has come to concern with respect to management override of controls. Okay. Page 26 and 27, I won't read through these in any detail. This is certainly not all encompassing, but really some of the key areas that we spend our time focusing on as part of the audit, some of the bigger areas, some of the areas that require maybe a bit of estimation or a bit of judgment on behalf of management. Happy to report, though, no significant findings, no significant issues from a financial statement accounting standpoint there. Okay. If we can move on to page 29, just to highlight here, there's 5 new standards that are applicable for the authority for the 2018 year end. So just letting you know that we did work through those with management. That's applicable for all entities following public sector accounting standards. No concerns on transition or implementation of those accounting standards. And then page 30 and 31, a summary of our audit adjustments. Similar to prior year, this is an adjustment that was identified not material to the financial statements as a whole, so we concur with management's assessment of that judgment or that decision with respect to not correcting that adjustment. And then lastly, maybe what I'll touch on page 32, so other observations. So to the point of the question that was asked earlier, we have not identified anything that we determined to be a significant deficiency in internal control, so that is an important point and distinction I want to make sure we make. These other observations are generally either best practices or things that we've identified in the course of the audit that we want to bring to your attention or feel like we should. With respect to segregation of duties and journal entries, this has been touched on for several years as part of the audit. Happy to report that we've looked at that and management has implemented our recommendations that we have recommended in the prior year audit, so no concerns there. And then one other comment with respect to the Auditor General report, which might be of interest, is that certainly we do have to look at that given the information that could have been in there. We had to assess that as part of the audit. We found that from a financial statement, financial accounting standpoint and controls around financial accounting, no concerns with the information that was contained in that report. So just wanted to make sure that we did highlight that. Okay. And then the rest of the report is our standard appendices, some required communications, and just some light reading as board members, so if you so choose.
Thank you very much. Member Johnson.
Yeah, thank you. Actually, you answered a lot of my questions, as you'll see by my tabs. But the one I noticed was on your page 32. the first section, the second paragraph, given the small nature of the finance team,
Yes.
your comment is that they're understaffed?
I wouldn't say understaffed, so I definitely can appreciate that. I think given the nature of the authority, and certain organizations of this side, you can't
Okay,
really afford.
he asked me to ask. No, I'm kidding.
So in other words, you want me to say more. I think it's a little tough in terms of being able to have a full complement of an accounting team, right? As you might
Sure.
have a delegate or delineation of authority where you have a manager of finance who really oversees it, followed by a corporate accountant or a controller,
Sure.
followed by a junior accountant. I don't know if certainly it's well within your purview to do so, but in your current state, there's really rests with just 2 to 3 people within the whole finance function. So it's just inevitable to the fact that as your manager of finance has to post certain journal entries because he's the one with the capability and skill
Right.
sets to know those. So the segregation of duties has come up in the past because of that, which is going to happen every year.
Right.
However, there are compensating controls in place to make sure that any entries your manager of finance posts is mitigated.
Thank you for that. And from what I read from this and from listening to your presentation was that given the small nature of the finance staff, they did take on the recommendations. You did follow through with them. So kudos to you and your group, John. Thank you.
Member Steele?
Thank you, Madam Chair. On Monday, we asked you a question with regards to forensic audits.
Yes.
Because that's been bantered about at the political level. Were you able to get a
Yes.
range of costing for us that we discussed there?
So even in some experiences that I've been involved in, now the forensic team really does keep stuff close to their chest, and given the private nature of that, they do that. With a very even limited scope, you could look at 20,000, and it would have to be very defined, and it might only be, there's typically 2 to 3 phase assessments that they'll do, kind of an initial scoping phase, and then present findings, and then look for your recommendation if you want to go to an assessment 2, if that makes sense. So it's kind of an overview. Here's what we think we might have found, and then do you want us to proceed further and really dig in and see what we can find? Even that first level of basis is going to get you 15 to 20,000, and then from there, each phase of assessment from a forensic accounting standpoint is just going to exponentially increase. You could look at 50,000, 75. I know that's obviously even increments, but you could really drive that number up real quick. I would say from a base starting point, and given what they gave me, you're looking at maybe 15 to 20,000 of a comprehensive assessment to get it started.
Thank you. And also discussed at Monday's meeting was with regards to the very pointed forensic audit that you would do. Because if you came in and did a forensic audit of the whole organization, it's astronomical. And obviously, what our accountant is telling us today, nothing has jumped out at them with regards to money in, money out, and how things are operating. The other discussion we had was a human resources audit, which we felt as a committee was probably more inclined to be undertaken aside from a forensic audit, because we really don't know how pointed it is. And again, these guys know what they're doing, so if they find something wrong, I think they'd be here telling us that there is an issue with NPCA. So I do trust them, but having experience on both the municipal side and business side, we can be spending a lot of money to find out what we know today. So we wanted to put that out to the board, just so you guys knew and what kind of money coming forward. I mean, if it's the board's wish, yeah, obviously we would with the majority, you'd proceed, but just so you know the cost, but we need to be very pointed. If you are going to take that track, we have to be very pointed on what we want them to look at. So, thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Steele. Member Foster?
Yes, thank you. Just to add to Member Steele's comments, at the meeting on earlier this week, bottom line is that we also thought that some of the issues on the financial side would probably fall out from the review of HR. As most of us have been very concerned about some of the, we'll call it whirling dervish that went on for a space of about 6 to 8 months at the NPCA. So our hope, and at least from that discussion, is that a lot of that would fall out. The other thing that was also mentioned that Member Steele didn't mention is with the other report that was done, the Auditor General, that was a very, very thorough report that came back into place for us. So So even in our discussion, and of course it's open for discussion here, but the thinking on the forensic side, on the accounting, probably would be overkill at this point, but we really do need to focus in on that HR end of things. So anyway, thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Member Foster. Member Encina?
Thank you. I don't think it would be overreaching. I would think if you looked at forensic after we had a chance to talk to the Auditor General, to see how far they went, to see if they actually, and my direct questions to them are going to be, did you actually look into criminality? That's why I stated before, there's a difference between the process of what you look at and what they're looking at, whether the books are all entailed. There's a second part of that, if there's any criminality behind it with regards to not entries, but what was claimed and whether you were allowed to, whether it was fraudulent, whether it was legitimate. So what I'm saying is, if we perhaps wait until after we had a chance to talk to the Auditor General, we get those positions qualified. Once that happens, then this board can determine which way we want to go, whether we in fact need appointed forensic audit with regards to restricted parameters of date-wise. I would suggest we move that way.
Thank you, Member Encina. Member Metcalf?
Earlier this week, we also discussed there was an ongoing OPP investigation at one point as well, and we're going to have a report back on that in the future. I do agree with Members Encina and Foster's statements that the Auditor General and our own auditor looked at the books and found nothing out of the ordinary. But however, I think everybody around the table knows that something happened in a certain time frame, and that's what I guess.
And I have a motion moved by Member Foster, seconded by Member Height. Excuse me. That the audited 2018 financial statements in draft and the audit findings report for the year ended December 31st, 2018, presented by Scott Plugers, Kpmg, be approved. All those in favor? Any opposed? And that's carried. There you go. Okay. So on to administrative business. The approval of the draft minutes, the full authority meeting March 20th, 2019. Oh, okay. We have some amendments. Moved by Member Wright, seconded by Member Height. I think so. Steele, sorry, Member Steele. That the full authority minutes of March 20th be amended to reflect a deferral of resolution FA-822-19 and that the word withdraw be removed from resolution FA-83-2019. All those in favor? Is there any opposed? So I guess that's carried. And the next motion, moved by Member Height, seconded by Member Foster, that the following meeting minutes be adopted. Full authority meeting minutes dated March the 20th, 2019 as amended, and full authority closed session meeting minutes dated March the 20th, 2019 to remain private and confidential. All those in favor? Are there any opposed? And that also is carried. Okay, is there any business arising from the minutes? Seeing none, there's correspondence. Are there any comments or discussion from the correspondence items? Member Johnson?
Thank you. The 4.3, this is a notice from the City of Hamilton asking for a completed update about the reserves. I'm just asking that we direct staff to do so. We just had our financial statement given to us. I can't see it not being a problem, just photocopying and sending it off.
Yes, absolutely, Madam Chair, through you. We would be pleased to do that. Once we sign also the draft, or now the approved audited financial statement, that will be distributed to all of our partners and the provincial governments. So I believe we had acted on sending the reserves to the City of Hamilton, but we would be pleased to send them the entire package.
Member Height?
Yes, as long as you're sending it to City of Hamilton, I'd like a copy of the reserves as well, please.
So perhaps we could forward to the entire board. They are part of the financial package, Member Height. Oh, you want it separate? Okay. Are there any other discussion? No other discussion? Then I have a motion moved by Member Foster, seconded by Member Steele, that the following correspondence be received for information. Email from the City of Hamilton dated March 2019, Conservation Authority Reserves, Environmental Registry Posting, Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Parks dated April the 5th, 2019, Modernizing Conservation Authorities Operations, excuse me, Conservation Authorities Act, and Environmental Registry Posting, Ministry of the Environment, Conservation and Parks dated April 5th, 2019, refocusing Conservation Authority development permits on the protection of people and property. Member Johnson?
Yeah, sorry, I just wanted to know, and I'm getting confused with the number system here, so just bear with me. So I'd like to ask our CAO to comment on the Ministry of Natural Resources and Forestry's grant allocation to the NPCA. My understanding is in the past we've been given $180,000. They reduced it by 50%. We've received this amount since 1996, and all of a sudden now, was this something you knew ahead of time?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I am extremely pleased that you've raised that question, Councillor or Member Johnson. Oh, damn. Sorry.
That usually happens to me.
Oh, sorry about that.
Yeah, and then put it in your pocket.
My apologies.
That's okay. I just saw everybody reach for their phones too, so I have a feeling that.
I am so sorry about that.
Yeah.
I just want to give you a very brief history because I think it's extremely important for the board members to be aware that in the 1950s, 60s, and 70s, we used to get at least 50 cents on the dollar for our entire program from the province of Ontario. So if our budget was $11 million, as it is this year, up until the early 1990s, probably 50% of that was paid by the province. In 1996, the then provincial government eliminated all of our capital budgeting. It was gone. And they cut back all of what we call as our transfer payments, which is the payment that each conservation authority gets every year to do certain work. Our transfer payments up until recently were $174,000 a year from the province out of an $11 million budget. So we got a little bit more for source water protection. I don't want to negate that. But in our total operations, we received $174,000 of a $11 million budget from the province. As you all are extremely aware, the province came down with their provincial budget last Thursday, and there were a number of cuts, including to conservation authorities. So every conservation authority in the province got their transfer payment cut again. So our transfer, everybody was reduced by 50%. So our transfer payment that was around $174,900 was cut in half. And we now, mid-budget year for us. It's not like we could prepare for it in 2020. So we now have rather than 174.9. They actually gave us a little bit more than 50%, and we have $90,000 this year. We can accommodate that in our budget, luckily, due to a number of staffing gaps and a number of other efficiencies that have been gained in the budget this year. We won't go into a deficit over that loss, but certainly it will have an impact next year as we move forward to 2020. I would also just indicate that Conservation Ontario and the Vice Chair and Chair are aware of this, have been responding to this initiative. We don't think we'll be overly successful in getting any money back, but the problem is that the province wants us to deliver on what they consider core mandate, which is floodplain management and regulations, yet that's the exact pot of money that they're reducing from us. And we all know that that means that they will want the municipalities to pick up that responsibility, which makes our budgeting for 2020 extremely challenging because everybody's been faced with cuts. So thank you, Member Johnson, for bringing that up. And I'm sorry if I didn't address your question completely.
You absolutely did. In fact, it's a segue into what I was just going to request. So this is another downloading. This is what they've been doing for now 20 some odd years. The Band-Aid solution this year, that's good to know, but it's just a Band-Aid solution. And I appreciate what Conservation Ontario is doing, but I also believe that maybe this board should be sending a letter to each of our municipalities asking for endorsement to go after not only Conservation Ontario, but also send it through AMO and directly to the minister. So if we could direct staff, please, to create a letter for the board to endorse, to send to our 3 municipalities, to get them to forward that further on, because it will end up being back on our taxes at budget time. They're going to come and say, we're now downloaded another 100,000 folks, so guess who's going to pay the bill? So if we can do that, that would be great. I don't know formally wise how you want to handle that, but we want to empower the staff to send these to our municipalities so that we can now pick up the fight and go forward.
So we can receive that as staff direction. Member Steele?
Thank you, and thank you to Member Johnson. I agree. But in that, make sure in that you outline the money that they're not giving us and what we've used it in the past for, so that we show that it was used for our core reasoning of getting the money, as the CAO has said, so that, we're not cutting out a fun activity that we use the money for. It was used for core reasons why that money was being sent by the province. So as long as we include that and how we used that money in the past, and that we will continue to use the 90,000, 82, 86 in there, but this is the reality that they are cutting our core services. So.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through to Member Steele. Yes, I failed to mention that when we do get our transfer payments, this particular pot of money, it is restricted in how we can spend it. We can't spend it on lands. We can't spend it on corporate services. We must spend it on the delivery of core mandate, which is our floodplain management comments under the Planning Act to you and your municipalities, and our regulations.
Would anyone else like to comment, or no other discussion? All right, so back to the motion. I guess at this point we can vote. All those in favor? All those opposed? And that's carried. Okay. So motion moved by Member Height, seconded by Member Foster, that the tabled correspondence from the Ministry, Natural Resources and Forestry dated April the 12th, 2019 regarding notification of 2019-2020 transfer payment funding be received. All those in favor? Any opposed? That's also carried. Okay, Chairman's remarks. That's me today. So one thing that I wanted to just bring up is that we did meet, the Conservation Ontario held its annual meeting On April the 1st, the chair, the interim CAO, and myself attended. There were 36 conservation authorities represented, and many of them were in attendance. There was an orientation presented and completed at the meeting for new chairs and vice chairs. The York Regional Chair, Wayne Emerson, was appointed as the Chair of Conservation Ontario for 2019, and many updates and reports were considered. However, two key reports addressed the provincial government's review of the Client Service and Streamline Initiative regarding conservation authorities and modernizing conservation authorities' operations review of core mandate. These two initiatives are referred to under correspondence in the April 17th agenda package. Please, the other thing I wanted to mention was at one point they asked for a vote on something, and Chair Billsma put up his hand, and the chair made a comment that, oh, there's a new face, and Dave proudly exclaimed, Niagara's back, at which point everyone cheered. So I just want to let you know, everyone was very happy to see Niagara represented and that we had new people at the table, and they were very encouraged, especially to see Gail there. So they were very happy that we were all there, and it was a very positive environment. So we're looking forward to continuing participation at that level, and I would encourage you to spread the good word about the new NPCA and the good work we're doing and our members, because you guys are making a big difference to this organization, and we're very proud of it. And at this point, I will pass it over for the Chief Administrative Officer's comments.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I too will be brief. The last month, further to your direction at the March 20th meeting, I've been spending a good deal of my time meeting with staff, getting their insights on the organizational structure, and we are looking very forward today to presenting to you in closed session some of our observations, our comments, and our recommendations to you on realignment. It's really given me an opportunity, and I want to thank there's a number of staff here right now, but it's given me an incredible opportunity to sit down with a number of staff one-on-one and hear from them and hear some of their perceptions on the last number of years in the organization. Item number 2, and my final point, Madam Chair, is it's extremely important for everyone to know that our May meeting date and location are changing. It's changing to accommodate the Auditor General coming and presenting her recommendations to the board. I wanted to alert this because I know a number of board members will probably have the May regularly scheduled meeting in their calendar. The May meeting now will be May 3rd. There'll most likely be a 2-hour session with the Auditor General. She's very pleased to come and meet with you. She's been pleased that she's been invited to attend our meeting. Staff will accompany her presentation by an update on all the work that we've been doing to meet the Auditor General's recommendations. I'm delighted, Madam Chair, I must say that we've made a lot of movement on her recommendations. The other thing is, because the meeting date has changed, we need to change the location. This facility is booked for May 3rd. So if I could just quickly turn it over to the clerk, we will send you out a notice and we'll put it in our website in big bold letters, but if you could just mention, Mr. Clerk, where the meeting will be.
It's going to be in Font Hill at the Meridian Center, and it's 100 Meridian.
It's at the new arena in Font Hill, in Pelham. The Meridian Center in, it's in Font Hill, 100 Meridian Way. Can't miss it. It's on Highway 20. Pelham, the wonderful town of Pelham.
So thank you, Madam Chair. As I said, we will be getting lots of notice out on the meeting date change on our website, because we know our citizens follow that, and we'll be giving you lots of updates on a meeting date change and location change. Thank you for that.
And of course, that's a public meeting, so the public are more than welcome to attend, spread the word among other people who may be interested in attending as well. So, for our business for information, we will be receiving all of the reports together unless any members would like to lift any for discussion. So at this point, I'd like to ask if there's any items in Section 5, Business for Information, that would like to be discussed. Member Height.
5.1, please. I'd like lifted to ask some questions.
5.1, are there any other items?
Do you want me to speak to that? Okay.
Okay.
At the end of the last term, I know that the counselor who was chair of the Conservation Authority at the time, Councillor Annunziata from Fort Erie, was somewhat adamant about staying on the board until a new legal board was put in place. If you look at the Watershed Management Status Report, page 1, it's somewhat shocking that the town of Fort Erie would have 20% of all the applications for the first 3 months going through for the town of Fort Erie, where the town of Fort Erie, if you look at Niagara Falls, Welland, and St. Catharines in total, just about total what Fort Erie did. It concerns me as if maybe they were being pushed through while he was still chair, and I don't know if that's a fact or not. I'd love to see what applications went through. Were they vetted properly? I'm concerned when I see that kind of a normality in a chart like this or in a report showing numbers like that. I don't know if staff want to answer that or can answer that today.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My apologies. I will certainly tackle the first part of it, and then I think our Director of Watershed Management would add on to it, and we can certainly investigate that further if the board wishes. I do want to just observe that when I looked at the statistics, I was surprised at the volume coming from Fort Erie. So there is a lot of work being done in Fort Erie right now compared to other municipalities. My perception in talking to the Director of Watershed Management was there was no influence in terms of moving any of those permits or applications through, but I'll let the Director, if I may, Madam Chair, speak to that issue himself.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair. These are for the Q1. So these are January since with the new board in place. And
well, I understand that, but they would have been put in motion with the previous board, I'm assuming, through the.
No,
that's what I was looking at, assuming that they might have been.
No, that what I can do for those for the planning and permitting aspects, we can go back, take a look when those applications came in, and I can provide that back to you. I'm not sure if you want it as a report or just an email or.
I don't know if you want me to respond. I just want to make sure it was done thoroughly vetted and it wasn't pushed through, initiated back in November, December when the former chair was still involved with the Conservation Authority. Then it takes a month or 2 or 3 to process, and that's what we're looking at, what was processed and began prior to us being here. I want to make sure it was done properly, that's all.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. We can certainly go back into our files. We keep detailed files and take a look at whether there's any documentation on file as to whether there has been any board dialogue with the staff in relation to those applications.
And some of the reasons I'm bringing that up is I had heard, and I don't know if this is factual, but I had heard that prior board members, prior to this board, were around the board office a great deal and were maybe doing too much with initial staff instead of going through the board. And that concerns me. We should be given direction. We should be dealing with policy. We shouldn't be dealing with day-to-day work. We shouldn't be micromanaging. And my concern was, and rumors had come out to me, that there was a lot of micromanaging going on with some of the members of the previous board.
Mr. Chair, through you to Member Height.
And bullying, as a board member reminded me.
Through the chair, Member Height, I think your perception is a correct one. And we will be chatting a little bit further about just an example or so of that later today. There is no doubt, and I do believe that that was an observation that the Auditor General made very clearly, that the board needed to keep into the policy venue rather than the operations venue. I don't think that was that doubt. And, but, while I say that, in the very short period of time that I've been dealing with this board, there's no doubt that you are focusing on policy and not on operations, and that is very much appreciated. But yes, I think your observation is a good one.
Okay, any further questions on 5.1? Councillor Beatty, or Member Beatty?
Maybe if I can help this report, because I think I had a lot to do with its present format. You really have to look at all 4 quarters and then look at the annual at the end, and you'll get the flow. And I look here for Fort Erie and I see that it's probably half of it is NEC, and I think that's just an anomaly. But you really do have to look at all 4 quarters and look at the final. And I think they're all available. All you have to do is ask for them. But as you get into it, you'll see the flows back and forth, and you'll note that Hamilton gets the least and pays the most. Thank you.
That's good. I don't know, it just means Hamilton doesn't put in a lot of applications. All these are is applications for planning, building permits, and NPCA. No, I'm just saying. So it's just volume, sheer volume, and sheer volume within Watershed, so. No, that's all right. Well taken. Well taken. So, any more questions of 5.1? So seeing none, we'll move these in block. So 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and that's it. We have a mover and a seconder, which is Councillor Height and Member Height and Member Foster. No further questions. All in favor? Any opposed? That's carried.
All right, so on to item 6, business for consideration. Standing committee reports, minutes of the CAO selection committee meeting dated March the 20th, 2019. I have a, pardon? Oh, all 3 of them. Or all 3 of them, okay. Motion moved by Member Steele, seconded by Member Foster, that the following committee reports be adopted and any recommendations therein approved. Minutes of the CAO Selection Committee meeting dated March the 20th, 2019. Minutes of the CAO Selection Committee closed session meeting dated March 20th, 2019 to be made public. And minutes of the Audit and Budget Committee April 15th, 2019 as tabled. All those in favor? Member Shurton?
Well, with the other members of the public here, can we get an update where we are as far as timelines or what our selection process is? Has it closed? Where are we at? Or if we can get an update.
Specific to the CAO?
Specific to the CEO.
Did you want to?
Madam Chair, I am not involved in that process. The clerk does sit in on those meetings. If there are board members, excellent.
Yeah, Member Steele.
Thank you, Madam Chair, as I do chair this committee. So we've chosen our firm to go out and do the headhunting. They've started that. We had a meeting last Friday with the committee. We went over a number of questions that he had for us. and we had the clerk with us, so there would be a number of reports and lots of information that goes to him so he can formulate everything that he's going out to. He described his process of all the periodicals and online employment listings that you would go out to as municipal governments do, conservation authorities and things like that. So in essence, we have a few weeks that he'll come back to us as he goes out with that, and then, and as the search goes. I'm not sure if it's listed, if he's listed it yet online, or is he just waiting for a little bit more information? Yeah, well, no, I'm just saying, everything he's asked for, we're either have given to him or in the process. Everything's been done. Okay, so that came out of that meeting. So that's really where we are. So he's really formulating everything as we're going out.
So just to follow up on that, with some of his guidelines, are they coming back potentially with 3 candidates, 5 candidates, the best candidate, or like what direction was this company given?
So in answer to that, really that'll be up to the committee as far as who that, he may come back and say, hey, I got 5 really good people. So the committee may interview those 5 and whittle it down, and then the full board authority would probably bring it down to 2 or 3 that the full board authority would give presentations to. I don't think we all want to sit here through the whole amount, but if indeed it was 5 or 6, we would whittle that down to 2 or 3 and then bring it to the full board authority for them to see those candidates, get the presentations, and then make a decision from there. So, yeah.
Great, thanks for that update.
Yeah, no problem.
Does anyone else have any other comment? Member Encina?
Through you, Madam Chair, I am just trying to find, someone can direct me, where it was that the governance committee was going to reach back and submit a report with regards to the request made by the Niagara region.
So that's an item separate from what we're moving at the moment. We're going to consider that next.
Thank you.
Member Steele?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a comment, and I'd like to thank our clerk for this. Under item 612, minutes of the CAO Selection Committee closed session, that hasn't been something that's come to this board, I don't think at all in the past, where he's bringing the minutes of the in-camera meetings forward. Some may remain as in-camera items and not for public purview. This one will be made public, that came out of our sessions. So I'd like to thank the clerk for doing this because, again, open and transparency. So this had nothing to do with the previous boards or anything like that. It's just was internally the way they did it. So that is a change, and I think it's a good change for this board. So I'd like to thank Grant for that.
Any further comments, questions? No? Okay, again, it's just 6.11, 6.12, 6.14. So at this point, I'll ask all those in favor. Any opposed? And that's carried. On to 6.13, minutes of the Governance Committee meeting. I have a motion moved by Member Steele, seconded by Member Foster, that the Governance Committee meeting report and minutes dated March the 27th be adopted and any recommendations therein be approved, save and accept recommendation number GC-13-2019 to be withdrawn and voted on separately. I imagine we have discussion on this one. Member Encina.
Thank you, Madam Chair. With regards to the Niagara region, and I believe through the report by Justice Ramsey, it was decided through him and through the region that it was felt that the composition of this board be made up of 12 people for now. Pending a review as we go forward, I would like to make a suggestion, a motion that we in fact reflect that, report back to the send a message to the Niagara region saying, yes, the composition of this board should remain 12 from the Niagara region until a governance review is completed or done. At such time it can be revisited. But for now, that we move forward and we say the composition is as of what we have right now. So I would suggest that that be amended if we're going to send anything back, just for the sake that Niagara Region has asked for it right now. Let's supply that to them. Status quo, should things change later, it can be revisited.
Member Johnson? Yeah, thank you. I'm really struggling with this because I believe at the beginning of this term, and I wasn't here for that meeting, but I read the minutes, or not the minutes, sorry, I was hearing from all the members, that it was agreed at the time that everyone was going to stay away from this conversation. Minister had ordered the 3 municipalities to duke it out. They decided to wait until the review was finished of the tax levy, and then they would duke it out. So it's above our pay grade at this point in time, at this level, to even comment on this, other than to abide by what the minister had ordered the municipalities to do. I understand that it's very frustrating for those that are here temporarily. So I would humbly suggest you go back to your municipalities and say, instead of this 3-month, 6-month stuff, could you please just leave us here until such time the 3 municipalities finish duking it out? And that way, there's a little bit of consistency at the table. If there are municipalities that have already appointed someone to take your place, then I would respectfully say, let that person take your place. And then the rest, at the end of it, the municipalities may come up with something totally different than what we're looking around the table right now. And I think we need to respect that process. So I think the message going back is, this governance report is great. I don't see anything wrong with it whatsoever, because it's following through on what we all agreed on in the very first meeting, is that we're going to let the 3 municipalities duke it out. And they've agreed to duke it out when the review is finished. So there's a process in place. Let's respect the process. I think it's above our jurisdiction. I really believe it's above our jurisdiction to tell people who we want at this table. That's not up to us. It's up to the Act, and it's up to the 3 municipalities to agree. Those are my thoughts, and I think that the governance report is fine, and I think it should be left alone.
Member Steele?
I mean, I do agree with most of the members' comments, but the unfortunate part about it is now we're drawn into another court case. I think going forward, we have to come out of this meeting with a number, and as Member Encina said, it's traditionally been 12 for quite a while now. I know it's fluctuated over years, but we came into this with 12 because it was 12. I think we need to send a message that the status quo stay, with the caveats that Member Johnson said. I have no issue with that. But I think we need to give the court something coming out of here that can go back to the region. They can comment on it, that it's been 12, it stays at 12 for now until all these other issues get resolved. But to say nothing going into court, I don't think bodes well for this organization. I know there's other comments, but interim, we believe it should be 12. And I believe most of the Niagara members believe that, because that's what it has been. So I think we should come up with something. So if you really take section 5.4 out of the report, defeat that section, add in that we recommend that the 12 stay on. We do have a motion on that. We brought it forward. Well, it's not at the table yet, but we did bring one to the table. If we can bring that up. But I mean, I have a real reservation on not saying anything because of this court issue. The unfortunate part about it is we're drawn into another court issue for what reason I don't know, but we have the 12 here. I just think we need to make a statement that this board is working, and it's working very well with the numbers that were here the last 4 years from the previous term of councils, the 3 councils, or 3 municipalities, and that it's, until changed, it will work fine. That's where I'm coming at with this. So that's my thought on that, is that we don't accept 5.4, and then we put in there that we actually have a motion being brought forward. I mean, if you want to hear it first, I have no issue by putting that on the floor so you can at least hear it.
Member Johnson?
My biggest concern right now is that if we put in any opinion whatsoever, it might predetermine the decision later on down the road. We have a mandate from the City of Hamilton, from our legal team and their interpretation. There was a lawyer that came to the past board from the NPCA that also had the same legal interpretation. If we vote today to maintain the 12, then I'm basically going against what our board of directors at the City of Hamilton have voted on. So I would very respectfully suggest that we don't weigh in. It's not up to us to make up this board membership. The minister made the orders. It goes to the municipalities. Regardless how this court order comes out, it's still my understanding that if the 3 municipalities sit down to duke it out, they could override this court decision. I could be wrong, but I'm saying right now is that the act says the 3 municipalities must agree. So that's my problem right now, is I don't want to put another number on the table that will screw up things at the end of the day. It may end up being 12, 4, and 2. It may. But I don't want to predetermine that. And again, it's not within our jurisdiction to determine it at all. It's up to the 3 municipalities, and we have to abide by what our municipality are suggesting right now. You guys will probably win if you put it to a vote right now because we're outnumbered. But bottom line is, Haldeman and Hamilton have already put their position forward, and I'm not going to speak for Haldeman, but I do recall the correspondence that has been coming in, that we have kept it as this is what we believe our membership should be, but we're going to let the courts and the process determine it at a later date. I think that as board members, we should not be weighing in on this at all.
I'm just going to defer to Ms. Woods for a moment.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I delicately walk into this issue because I have certainly learned over the last number of days how sensitive an issue this is, and I want to be sensitive to everybody on this. I just simply want to paint the picture to where we're at right now so that, that we all know. And I'll give you my perspective. I do believe that the current appointees from the region of Niagara are appointed until, is it the end of June? The end of June. And in the interim, as I had indicated, I circulated to you a statement where A Better Niagara has asked that the issue be referred back to the courts. We were not represented by a lawyer during that last discussion, is my understanding. I don't believe that that is a good position for this authority to be in. So I'm waiting for some instructions from you. We need to get back on that court case as to whether we're going to have a respondent or not. That would be our lawyer. The lawyer can just go and attend the hearing, or we can make a statement, whatever. I won't weigh in on numbers. I just also wanted to just advise the board, there are 3 mechanisms, to my understanding, of how the board can determine your numbers. One is a ministerial order. The ministerial order, in my opinion, is a very, very long process. You need to go up to the minister needs to weigh in on it, and I think the minister, and I don't want to put words in his mouth, could be a little reluctant to weigh in on this. The second is a court order, so we can wait and see what happens as a result of A Better Niagara taking this issue to court, and we don't know what number the judge might land on. All our lawyer has said to us is if we have a preference, it would be good to weigh in at the court, in front of the court. And I'm not saying what my number is, because I know that's folly to this group. That's all I'm reporting, is what our lawyer has said. The third way that, and I am extremely used to this process, I've determined board numbers where I'm quite accustomed to working with, it's the actual board that provides the recommendations to the municipalities. In Niagara, Hamilton, and Holden, you're working from a separate process. where the regional chair has sat down with the head of Hamilton and with the head of Haldeman and tried to work through numbers. I am extremely used to working with two boards where the board actually sits down and determines their numbers. I know for this board that seems to be at issue. The issue that I simply raised in front of the governance committee is I agree with Member Johnson. We could be looking at a very different board complex when the provincial government review comes down, or there's been some court order. My only and main concern is that staff need a board to work with in June forward. That's my main concern. So whatever those numbers are, whatever Niagara Region lands on, they've asked us for advice. The governance committee made it clear to me that they didn't really want to give a lot of advice. My feeling is different, but I'm the CAO. I can only make recommendations. I can't choose. But at least the governance committee suggested that we can provide Niagara Region with a list of competencies. And we're certainly prepared to do that. And then we just need a board of directors, somebody from June forward, to give staff the guidance that we need to move forward.
There's a list now. I just want to weigh in. When we're sitting at this table, we're first and foremost members of this committee. And I think we really need to view this issue from that lens. So I think it's reasonable for us to provide leadership and guidance to our member municipalities in terms of what's best for this board. And I would agree with Gail that, recommending a list of competencies is something that a responsible board would undergo. And knowing how sensitive this can be, I think it's reasonable to provide it as guidance where there may be an absence of an established process. So if a municipality does not have a process in place, they have the option of using something we have determined that would be helpful in determining the members who are sitting at this table. So I'm going to concur with Gail on that, but I do have lists, so I'm going to go on to Member Beattie.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Any way we handle this at this table is going to be divisive. Because if I'm reading it correctly from the discussions I've had, and I'm going to ask, is there a motion on the floor, first of all? Is there a motion on the floor, seconded?
The motion at present on the floor to approve the governance committee meeting minutes, save and accept the contentious motion that you folks are discussing.
Okay.
I think procedurally the proper way is to vote on this, to receive those governance
Yes.
meeting minutes, save and accept the contentious item, then bring forward the contentious item. If you decide that, as it appeared in the minutes, if you decide that that's not the way you want to continue to proceed, you need to defeat that motion. And then there is a subsequent motion that was, I think the wording was prepared by our CAO and circulated electronically to you folks, and that has been moved and seconded as well as an alternate course of action. If there's another course decides upon, we'll have that action out at this point.
So would you mind if
So
you
let's
move forward
if
on
if nobody has an objection, I will move that motion to get it on the floor. It's already moved and seconded? Okay, so that's the motion on the floor? Okay, have we voted on it?
No, we have not.
Okay, because we had another motion down at the end. That's a separate motion
Yes,
calling for number 12, so it's a motion on a motion or is it an amendment to the motion?
there's nothing. We're just discussion right now. So,
Okay, so I'll defer talking and I'll call the question and let's get this on the floor.
okay,
And we
so
can deal with, we can deal with the numbers.
thank you, Member Beattie. All those in favor? Any opposed? Right, except 5.4. Okay.
Okay.
On to motion for 5.4, moved by Member Steele, seconded by Member Foster. I think we all know what we're talking about. Would you like to continue, Member Beatty?
I'm going to give, well, I'll make my comments and then I'll give some of the opportunity. This is going to divide us. If I read this correctly, Niagara, for their good reasons, want 12. I would say the only number 12, and I've heard the thing of we can have 27, so we're only taking 12. I've heard that comment. I don't know if it's legally correct, but I haven't seen anything to justify it's legally correct. Hamilton has a position of 542, and that is my council's position, and it's based on Hamilton's interpretation of the Act, because if you can't get an agreement, you got to go to the Act. So we're sitting here, and Member Johnson has pointed out, we're sitting here waiting for the 3 municipalities to hopefully come to an agreement. Otherwise, it goes to the Act. And if it goes to the Act, I know Niagara's going to argue the 27 notion. We're going to argue the 542, and I think Haldeman agrees with our 542. So if we go ahead and vote on the 12 for Niagara, I think and show that as direction for your region, I think that's going to divide the board. It's just going to chop it along the municipalities. So why do that? I think right now we seem to be getting along. I wouldn't want to disrupt, and given the fact that you could change in June, we could have how many new members in June from Niagara? It's all in a state of flux. Your membership's in a state of flux. Who's going to represent Niagara? The numerical composition of the board is in flux because, and I say this with all due respect, Hamilton has a legal opinion, Haldeman has a legal opinion. I haven't seen Niagara's legal opinion. I know the group is taking it to court to try to get an illegal opinion from a judge. There's so many variables out there that the only thing we can do is argue, because ultimately we'll ask for a recorded vote if it's 12, and I'm pretty sure that it's going to be 12-5, and it's going to be a recorded vote, and what does that accomplish? Unless you want to go back to them and say, the Niagara representatives of this body endorse 12, 4-2 or 12-2-1, which is the original, and the Hamilton-Haldeman members of the board support 5-4-2. And that would be a fair assessment of the position of this board as it, unfortunately, as it breaks up into 2 groups. And I don't see how I tend to support Member Johnson's position that let's wait, let's see what happens. Thank you.
I just want to clarify. I think there's actually 3 issues. There's the potential for an extension. There's the composition, which I think I'm hearing people want to stay away from.
Yes.
And there's the skills or competency recommendation. So there are.
Can we extract the 3 and maybe
we could even vote separately.
Vote separately on the 3, because I don't think there's a contentious issue with 2 of them.
Right. Okay. But I will. Did you want to comment before?
No, Madam Chair, I just, in order to get my thoughts understood as we move towards June, can I just ask, and pardon me if this is a very ignorant question, but if Niagara Region we don't comment on it, but if Niagara Region extends the appointments of the existing 12 members that sit around the table, if they do that, is it my understanding that Hamilton and Haldeman will not accept that? No, we need to be really clear on this, because Niagara Region, and I have their letter here, they have asked the board, you, to request the extension of the current board members here. I just need to, so we have a couple of options. You can either say what the governance committee said, which is we're not going to comment, or we can comment on it, number 2. And if we don't comment on it, I'm just trying to understand if Niagara Region does appoint 12 people, is that contentious at this board at this time.
So I actually have a speaker list that I need to go back to. So member Height and then member Johnson.
The CAO's brought up a letter requesting an extension for another 6 months. Who did it come from? I don't recall us dealing with this at the board, at the region, that we asked to extend us for another 6 months on top of what we've already done. You're shaking your head. I'm looking to the CAO. To June, not beyond June. And we're hearing it's another 6 months after June. That's news to me.
Madam Chair, the Board of Directors received a letter from the Region of Niagara dated March 1st. You dealt with that letter at your March 20th meeting, and you forwarded it to the Governance Committee for consideration. I believe that the region is asking you to comment on further extension of the 12 board members. Your terms end in June. They're also asking us to comment on composition. My interpretation of composition is not numbers. My interpretation of composition is citizen appointees versus elected appointees. That's my interpretation, not numbers. And the third thing that they're asking you for is, would you provide them with advice? They've specifically asked for a skills matrix.
I'm not arguing.
Okay.
I'm arguing the fact that you suggested that there was another 6 month extension.
No.
And that's new. Okay.
No.
Okay. So that's number one. There is no another 6 months extension. Number two, some of us were in favor of 12-2-1. Some of us might be in favor of 27-4-2. To Councillor or to Member Beatty's comment, some of us brought up that number 27 because that's a number that I believe is a valid number depending on what information you review, determining the factors. Okay, how many members? 12-2-1 worked when I sat on this board. 12-2-1. 12-4-2 seems to work as well. I don't have a problem with what we're doing currently. I believe that in a number of weeks or months, the regional council would like to present their 12 members to this board until that changes, with people to sit on this board for a permanent time. If it's going to stay as 12-4-2, if it goes 12-2-1, if it goes whatever number, I believe that that's where we're going. And I don't believe it's the end of June. I believe it's the middle of June, because I believe we were appointed in early December, or mid-December. So I think if you're looking at 6 months, it's not to the end of June, but it's to the middle of June. The motion that I'm looking at in 5.4, we don't want to make comment on it. We should have a lawyer there. We aren't going to determine it. We send it to the chair of the region, the mayor of Hamilton and of Halderman, to deal with this and come forward, which they haven't come forward either. So we're in, okay, let's vote on it. Well, if Niagara has more votes here, as Member Beatty said, the vote will be 12-5, whatever the number, 12-4, 12 against 6. Not necessarily, but most probably we're going to ask to have more representation than the other two members, because we put up more money, most of the money, not most of the money, but a large majority of the money. So it's only fair for us to have a majority around this group. But let's think about what's more important for the conservation. Forget the word Niagara. What's important for conservation? It's having good people here. And that's one of the reasons we wanted to have some kind of matrix, so we have a good mix of people here. Not all politicians, not all members of the public, but a good mix, so there are good decisions, because that's more important than the number. If the number around here was 6 and they were all great people, that's good for the conservation of Ontario. That's what we're here for, peninsula conservation. Forget Niagara word, because we're more than Niagara. Or the province of Ontario is going to change a rule and have fewer conservation authorities, fewer municipalities, and by the way, if our I'll watch what I say, but things could change totally, that you might not be representing St. Catharines, Hamilton, or whatever. We're going to be representing a larger group, and our representative from Grimsby might be part of Hamilton. Who knows what's going to happen? So
Member Height,
I believe we should have someone there. I don't believe that we should have a specific stand unless you want to vote on it today. I'm prepared to vote on it, but it's senseless, I think. It's more important to have a representative from our group. And the last representation that was made by staff inferred that Councillor Height, Senzik, and Edgar were members of Better Niagara, which I can publicly say I'm not a member of the organization who is now taking us to court, even though one of our staff included me in their response, which I was somewhat taken back.
Member Height, let's bring it back. So just a reminder,
We're not talking about the numbers Niagara has, but that was brought up in terms of composition. So is there a right proportion that should be citizen-based versus political? And I'll just suggest, if we look to Hamilton, it was 50-50. So maybe that's a potential guideline.
I'm happy with 50-50.
Okay.
From the region, and then let the councillors at the region wrestle out which community has a representative from council and which community has a representative from the public. I have no problem with that.
Okay,
I always get in trouble.
So I'm going to turn it over to Member Johnson, and then I have Member Shurton.
Actually, I'll defer to Member Shurton. He has not spoken to it yet, and I'll speak after him.
Well, my first comment is, being on the board the last term, one thing I can say is the member from St. Catharines seems to be a long-winded. It doesn't matter who's in that chair. So, but in saying moving forward here, I don't know why, if we want to provide some update, my suggestion is we basically say we've directed the 3 participating municipalities to come up with the numbers, and that's our position. To me, that's a simple position, and that can be our direction.
Member Encina?
Oh,
sorry. Member Johnson, did you want to go
thank
now?
you. Yes, because I was just deferring to the speaker who hasn't spoken yet. So just very quickly, my understanding, Gail, and please forgive me for using first names, it's so much easier for me. You're asking for, the concern that the staff have is that the extensions that keep going 3-6 months, it's just not consistent enough, and your staff needs to have some consistency. I totally agree, and I said that in my opening statement, that we should at the very least say, go back to your municipalities stating, please keep us in line. We're prepared to work together until such time the municipalities come up with different numbers or the same, but at least keep us on for consistency purposes only, and no more of these 3, 6 months, 9 months extensions. It's too much of an influx for everyone, including all of us, not just staff. So if at the very least we can say, go back to and it's only the Niagara region, I believe, that's doing this extension stuff, because I believe Haldimand and Hamilton are set in stone right now. So if we can go back to the region of Niagara saying, okay, to respond to your suggestions and your question, we are asking that all memberships stay as is until such time the 3 municipalities agree on the composition. Period. It could be 3 months, could be 3 years. It doesn't matter. It's when they decide. And that's what we're going to defer to is their authorization. Citizens versus politics. I really have a hard time with that because politicians are citizens too. And citizens can be politicians. And everyone has a different skill set. Some people have the same skill set. I really believe it's up to, and I would defer again to staff. What would you like to see on this board that would help you do your job and reach that mandate? And I think that's where the governance committee was coming from, was letting the staff set up, at least for us to approve, that's fine too, but you set up your wish list, who you would like. And does it have to be a politician? Does it have to be a citizen? It could be somebody who is all of the above.
So that's my other suggestion for you. So at the very least, if we have to weigh in on this, it would be, we are prepared to work together until such time the 3 municipalities let the process work. They want to wait for this tax levy to be done and over and said, let's bury it, put a big bow on it, and then they can agree on the composition. We abide by it regardless. And my understanding is, yes, you said ministerial order, then it becomes a court order. But my understanding is if the 3 municipalities agree to one formula, no matter what, they send it up to the minister then can override everything. So he can say, yep, the 3 municipalities have agreed, so this is what we're going to do. So again, it's not up to us to make up that composition, but we can say we're prepared to work together until such time the composition is set in stone by the 3 municipalities' agreement. I'm prepared for that. I'm also prepared to set the staff, give us your wish list, who you want on here, skill set wise. If there's a politician with that skill set, it doesn't matter. If they have the skill set, that's what matters. If the citizen has better skill sets, they should be here. That's up to your municipalities to agree. So those are my comments, and I hope we can wrap this up in a bow and send it away so we can get back to work.
All right, Member Encina.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I feel like a rose between 2 thorns right now. No, I'm sorry.
No, I like the thorns. I'm just wondering how you got the
He's no rose. He's no rose. Or you can be interpreted, I'm the smelly one then, right? In any event, I do agree we need to have something sent back. That we can't, to sit back and say nothing would be irresponsible on our part. I do agree, status quo, things are working well, let it go. With regards to the changes, 3 municipalities have put forward people's names that they would like to see. One being my position. I don't have a problem yielding that because I know the people that are coming in are well versed and have the best interest at heart for this board and for the NPCA to survive and to prosper. But I do believe that we do need to send a reply. To say nothing is wrong. And I do agree, let things hash out at the top if we have to do that. And let staff and yourself know that things need to continue until such time as it's hashed out at the end. And that's all for this rose.
Thank you, Member Encina. Member Foster? Yeah, I got it.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a quick comment to Member Johnson and others. You know, I think all of us from Niagara came onto this board not particularly concerned about whether we were going to be here 3 months or 6 months or 18 years. The reality is that we're here to try and resolve a whole bunch of problems, and that's what we have been doing. And in fact, you know, I can say without a shadow of a doubt, you know, like, I'm totally up to my ears in what's going on with the NPCA now, with governance committee, with the audit committee the other day. I'm dealing with these board meetings. I'm, you know, trying to balance off our crazy schedule at the region as well while we're doing this. So just, we're legitimate going on with this. And if I'm not a member of this committee come, you know, the middle of June, that's fine. I don't think any of us are sitting around worried about that. I think what we really want to do is make sure all of this is on the right footing and moving forward completely. And so I do appreciate your comments on that, but let's just remember, we're here to also get a job done, which was originally mandated for us. So thank you.
Thank you, Member Foster. Member Kiokio.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I can tell you that my blood pressure is a lot lower than it was when I started this committee, this board. I was going to save my comments for the end, but however, I will state it now because I really like the direction that this board is going, opposed to when I first started. And I think we're making great strides. And I'm glad to see Ms. Wood here as our interim CEO because I think she's done a lot. And particularly like to see the staff that are sitting there that are able now to answer our questions. So we're going in the right direction. I think Member Johnson is right. We should let the people at the top hash out the numbers. But in the meantime, I know that when we talk about municipalities I think there's 3 right now that are ready to, for people to step in that are very qualified to be here. And one of the municipalities is the city of Welland. I'm ready to step aside. Like I said, the person that is coming here has the experience, is more knowledgeable than myself in conservation. I think same with some of the other municipalities. And I think we're ready to step aside and let this board talk about conservation and work on conservation. So that's the direction I like to see. And just kudos to everybody around the table and the staff and our chair and Ms. Wood for the wonderful work that has been done to this point. Like I said, my blood pressure is a lot lower than it is when it started.
Member Shurton.
Just to be clear, because I can totally appreciate our CEO want to know how this board is going to look as far as who's here and who's not here for staff purposes after June. But I'm hearing different numbers. So I guess you guys have already got people in place. So who around this board here can mention that you're planning on staying, or you've been reappointed by somebody else from your municipality?
I can speak to that. So there are 3 municipalities within Niagara that have citizen appointments, which include St. Catharines, Welland, and Fort Erie. So part of what we could be and Grimsby.
We haven't officially put it, but I'm in a position where I'm not going to be here for the whole 4 years. Sorry, I'm in a position that I won't be here full time. So we have a person, but because we were waiting for the skill set, we didn't move forward on it from the municipality of Grimsby right now. So we can, depending on when. I'm here till June, but I think we will move forward as a municipality. Thank you.
So if we are recommending that there aren't, short-term numbers or, durations placed on the Niagara board, then I think what I'm hearing is that the citizen appointments should move into their rightful place on the board. And maybe we could include that. I don't know if it's an amendment at this point or if we need to defeat.
I think we should probably defeat this one.
Okay.
Start fresh, I think.
Okay, it sounds like we need to start fresh. Member Steele.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Can we not dissect 1, 2, 3, and 4? Because some of those like item 1 we can receive. There's nothing wrong with accepting that.
Well, why don't we vote on them all separately since they are all separate and distinct? Does that sound fair? Okay, well, I'll start with the motion we have, which it sounds like we're going to have a new motion. So as is, moved by Member Steele, seconded by Member Foster, recommendation number GC-13-2019. All those in favor? Any opposed? And that's defeated. Okay, so we're waiting on a new motion?
Well,
Do you want to read it?
Well, I've got one here, but I think I do want to have it changed slightly based on conversation. But if I can bring in number 1 first, that the report GC-0419 respecting the correspondence of the Niagara Region dated March representation be received. So we can receive the report.
Okay,
Still make changes.
I've got a motion for that. Moved
That'll
by
be last, after our changes. You want to do that last?
You can receive the report into the record regardless at any point.
Okay, so let's get that off. If we can get that off the
So
table.
moved by Member Steele, seconded by Member Foster, that report number GC-4-19 respecting the correspondence from Niagara Region dated March 1st, 2019 regarding Niagara Region representation on the NPCA be received. All those in favor?
Yes, we'll receive it.
Any opposed? Carried.
Okay, so I do have a motion. which I'm going to amend. Rob's okay with me amending it while we're here. Okay, so, but Rob originally said, so, but I'd like us to formulate some of this as we're sitting here, because I'm going to go so far and then read what we have, but I want to reformulate some of this. So whereas the Region of Niagara requested the NPCA in their March 1st, 2019 letter for comments regarding NPCA board composition and qualifications, and whereas the Auditor General of Ontario provided recommendations regarding board skills, experience and training in her September 14th, 2018 report on the NPCA, and whereas the Province of Ontario is currently reviewing regional governments which could impact the future board of the NPCA, and whereas the City of Hamilton appeal regarding the NPCA levy is under review. Therefore, be it resolved that the Region of Niagara appoint 12 members to the NPCA until the City of Hamilton's appeal regarding the NPCA levy is complete, and that that the Chair of the Region of Niagara, the Mayor of the City of Hamilton, and the Mayor of the City of Haldeman have reached an agreement with final composition be forwarded to the board with those memberships. So that goes out.
Can I just say, I think
And that's where I would leave it. So that until those are done, we can say the 12 that are originally here stay here until those things are completed. So if the Hamilton issue is done in 2 months, 3 heads of council come to an agreement in the next 2 or so months, 3 months, whatever it may be, no matter what the number of months are, that's when then the full composition will come. But in the interim, we just say that the 12 that are here, I'll say 12 seats, not necessarily the actual people,
Okay.
continue until these things are complete.
Okay.
So, so I've got that. And that's what I had, appoint 12 members. So whether Niagara wants to appoint the 3 citizens or 4 citizens with Jeff's stuff, so it doesn't say who the members are.
I think Member
So further,
Johnson has a comment.
No, but I'm just going to go further that the NPCA recommend a list of competencies modeled from the Alberta Public Agencies Matrix to the Region of Niagara in order that the region can forward the competencies to municipalities regarding whether they wish to recommend to the region to appoint an elected or citizen appointee. It says here after January 2020, but I think we can just end it at that because they may want to use them right away if this stuff changes. And I'll leave the last one off for now because I don't think it applies today. So that's really where I'm going with this. I'm just trying to set a number so that going forward until all these issues are complete, we know our numbers. It's not etched in stone. We're not saying it has to be 12, 4, 2, but until those, the one court case with Hamilton and the 3 heads of council come to an agreement, which will be sent back to this board with what's going on going forward from there, at least we can move forward with this group and get things done. That's really where I'm going with this. So it doesn't set in stone that it's 12. It's not. It's really what you said, Brenda, as far as we're waiting for all this stuff to come. So I'm just trying to bring in what you were saying because I do agree with some of the stuff you said. So, anyways, I'll end.
Member Johnson.
Love to see this written down. That would be really helpful because, and I also believe that there should be some more whereases in there. So that was what I was going to comment on as well. So it really comes down to why we're deciding. But also one of the therefores should be resolved that the staff of the NPCA provide the board with a wish list of the skill set that they would like to see. So if we could get this in writing, if you don't mind, and I'm prepared to actually table this part, let's get on with the rest of the agenda. I would just love to wordsmith some of this a little bit so that we're all in agreement instead of trying to do this on the fly. So is there any way, Gail, we can have this printed off?
Thank you, Madam Chair, through you. What I would recommend is if we could take that resolution and through our staff at Balls Falls, Adam, if we could type that into a computer here at Balls Falls and get it distributed for the board members. In the meantime, we could, could table it until such time as you see this in front of you and move on with the agenda.
I'd like to table it at this point in time until we get the wordsmithing sorted out, and then if people want to tweak it after that, at least we have it in front of our faces. Thank you.
Thank you. Oh,
We would require a mover and seconder
Oh.
on that.
Member Sherton, Member Metcalf. All those in favor? Any opposed? And that's tabled. Perhaps we could grab a coffee. Do you want to grab a coffee?
Agenda and then have lunch.
Members, can I have your attention, please? We're going to take a short break just to get things together here. So if you want to grab a coffee or a water and then come back, please. Everyone's back in their seats. Okay, so back to the motion, which you all should now have printed and put in front of you. I'll give you a moment to read it, unless do you want me to read it? We'll let them read it. Doesn't matter? Okay, and then we'll... Okay, is there any single line item that you would want voted on separately? Member Johnson?
I'm sorry, I thought we were going to table this and get through the rest of the agenda so we'd have time, because this is the one, the very first therefore is the one that I really wanted to tweak a little bit more.
Okay, we can...
Because I don't like it.
We'll do that.
Okay, so
Noted,
can we
and-
just table this and get through the rest of the agenda? And
Yes.
then again, I thought this is what we were doing to wordsmith it. Yep. And again, this is on the fly. I don't want to do that.
Move on to 6.2.1. So motion moved by Member Height, seconded by Member Foster, that report number FA-47-19 respecting appointment, reappointment of NPCA compliance regulation officers be received, and that the board appoint, reappoint the following NPCA staff enforcing Section 29 of the Act as regulation officers pursuant to Section 30.1 of the Conservation Authorities Act, RSO 1990, Chapter C.27 for the term of their employment with the NPCA. I'm going to pronounce some of these wrong. Michael Boyko, Adam Christie, Nathaniel Devos, Jeffrey Fazakas, Kim Froelich, Michael Germain, Robert Hayslip, Robert Currit, Michael McIntyre, Roberto Perisotti, Robert Schultz, Mariah Tempest, that the board appoint, reappoint the following NPCA staff enforcing Section 28 of the Act and Ontario Regulations 15506, or as amended, as regulation officers pursuant to Section 30.1 of the Conservation Authorities Act, RSO 1990, Chapter C.27 for the term of their employment with the NPCA, David DeLuce, Daniel Drennan, Darren McKenzie. Any discussion? All those in favor? Any opposed? Carried. 6.2? 6.22, the motion moved by Member Foster, seconded by Member Shurton, that report number FA-48-19 respecting NPCA administrative bylaw proposed change to Section 4, subsection 4.5 chair and vice chair appointments to standing committees be received, and that the Board of Directors approve a change to Section 4, subsection 4.5 of the NPCA administrative bylaw to appoint the chair and vice chair as ex officio non-voting members to authority standing committees, that Section 4, subsection 4.5 of the administrative bylaw be changed to reflect that standing committees will have a minimum of 3 members, with the chair and vice chair being ex officio non-voting members. I just want to comment on this because I brought this forward. My concern was, one, there is a workload component of this, but 2, the chair and the vice chair being automatic members on every single committee we have, I believe allows for a level of undue influence on our decision-making process. And second to that, it's an opportunity to claim per diem on 8+ meetings a month, which I think gives a financial incentive for a chair or vice chair appointment. So this change allows trust to be in the committee to make the decision, but also for the chair and the vice chair to participate when they want, but not to do so for a financial incentive. So I'm very much in favor of this. Member Shurton?
Just a question on that. Like, what are the numbers if the chair and vice chair are there? Do we have like 3 or 4 members in each? I can't remember what was the total now. My only concern with that, I totally understand, and I think it's a great initiative that you brought this forward, but I don't want just 2 members or 3 members being on this board making the decision now of these subcommittees.
The
So what's the number?
clarification is a minimum of 3 members, but my understanding is that additional members can join committees if so desired.
Okay, thanks for that.
Any other comments or questions? All those in favor? Any opposed? That's carried. 6.2.3, an update on memorandums of understanding with watershed municipalities, moved by Member Shurton, seconded by Member Foster, that report number FA-49-19, respecting an update on the memorandums of understanding with watershed municipalities, be received for information. Any conversation on this? Questions? All those in favor? Any opposed? That's carried. 6.2.4, revitalizing the NPCA restoration program. Motion by Member Height, seconded by Member Shurton, that report number FA-37-19 regarding revitalizing the NPCA restoration program be received, that the proposed restoration program be approved for implementation as outlined in report number FA-37-19. Member Wright.
I had a few comments and questions, I guess. Under the purpose, the 4th bullet, that had been deferred from the last point. I think there was quite a bit of discussion. It seems like it's being just rolled in with this one. It'd be nice to get a separate vote on the authorization for the funding for the lakefront owners. A few other things too I had. On the page, I guess it's 159. So it goes through the strategic plan. Considering the last administration, I'm not sure if I want to go along with their strategic plan as my input for the restoration going forward. I'm also looking at this, and I don't see anywhere when the last restoration committee went a restoration program and the documentation went to the board, the board got the whole package. For instance, the forms, the decision matrix, and the weighting of the criteria. I don't see any of that here, not even as backup, and that concerns me considering the detail that we've been going into for some of the other ones. And I would like to submit a motion to actually send direction back to the staff to actually bring back to the board the actual decision-making process and the criteria. For instance, it talks about rebuild the canopy for 1 million trees. If you look at the direction of the science actually talks about for watershed management as a whole, an integrated approach. 1 million canopies for trees doesn't cut that in my terms. I know that Auditor General had made a mention of the trees, but just trees alone, I don't agree with that. I like the idea of the watershed planning and management cycle. That's item number 5 on 159. And I think that needs to be emphasized further. Watershed plans and sub-watershed plans are an excellent way of identifying where you can improve water quality. And and that needs to be emphasized more, actually, and I would prefer. NPCA actually did analysis of their watershed plans back in 2016, and I will say I was part of that. It was volunteered that I had to run it. But one of the points of that was it came out of and analyzed the watershed plans that we have and looked at the deficiencies and basically looked at a way of going forward, the best way of going forward for water quality improvement, for an integrated approach. It was done by a consultant, and I would like to see actually that added as one of the mechanisms for the decision-making and the criteria, actually, because I think that would help a long way. Another thing I don't see anywhere in here is one of the key things for making sure a restoration project works is the buy-in by the homeowner and the landowner, and that would used to be one of the criteria, and that's not, I don't see that anywhere here, and that's really important when it comes to things like watering of the trees in the future so they don't die after a year, things like that. So I'd like to see quite a bit more. So I'd like to provide direction to staff to come back with the full decision matrix on and the criteria, like it has been provided in the past to the board. Oh, one last thing as well. There's no mention here, for instance, it's 500,000. There's no mention of how that's going to be spent across the watershed. And we've just had a really rough discussion, but it could all be spent in Niagara-on-the-Lake, for instance. There's no discussion here on how that's going to be allocated or you know, if there should be criteria to actually give a broader approach. And I'd like to see something like that in there. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Member Wright is quite correct. If I can just very briefly address a few of his points. I just remind the board that what we are just asking for at this point in time is your blessing to reapprove the restoration program, because in essence this board canceled it in January. We're saying we need this program back. So this is a high-level request of the Board of Directors to permit staff to get involved in the restoration program again. And then, Member Wright, you're absolutely correct. When we get your direction to become re-involved, if you will, in the restoration program, then we will plan all of the details, the criteria, the rankings, who you might want for a committee to review some of these things. I was the one who directed staff to keep it at a very high level at this point in time and not go into a lot of details in the board until the board actually gave us the blessing to move forward. The second point, and we would be very happy to bring those details back to you. The second point on the strategic plan, nobody agrees with you more than I do. And I have brought to the attention of the chair and vice chair that your existing strategic plan, and it's the only one that you've got right now, was approved by the former board of directors. And there are, in my humble opinion, there are concerns about the 1 million trees and the 3 million native shrubs because they're not pegged into an overall target that is driven by a watershed plan. So you're absolutely correct on that. And the staff recognize that as well. And so I want to assure you that even though our strategic plan talks about restoration and revitalization and conservation, the staff are very conscious of the fact that we need to peg this into targets that will give us demonstrated movements forward in restoration, bring that back to the board of directors, and we can move forward from there. So absolutely agree with the member. We'd just like a little bit your approval to move forward, then we can bring this back to you with details.
Through you, Chair. Thank you very much, CEO.
Any other comments or questions? None? Where are we? Here. Okay. Did I already read this out? All right. All those in favor? Any opposed? And okay, that's carried. oil and water. Do we want to deal with this prior to the enclose? Oh. Oh, okay. We're going to save it for the end. So at this point, there is a motion for the in-camera? Okay. All right, at this point, we have a motion to move in camera, moved by Member Shurton, seconded by Member Wright, that the meeting of the Board of Directors of the Niagara Peninsula Conservation Authority convene in closed session at 12:16 p.m. in accordance with Section 11.1 of the NPCA Administrative Bylaw for the discussion of matters relating to personnel matters about an identifiable individuals, including NPCA employees, organizational review, and labor relations, human resources, or employee negotiations Q1 legal update. All those in favor? Any opposed? Thank you. Carried. Okay, all those in favor? Any opposed? We're going to go back to 6.1.3 to address the motion. Just wait for... Oh, new business. Can we wait? You want to do it now? Okay. Member Steele.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I hate staff sitting behind me, not because I don't like them sitting behind me. When I'm listening to somebody talk, I want to see them. Absolutely. It's all right for them. Can we reconfigure this table for our next board meeting so that staff sits up there, either an angled, something better, so that we can put the podium in the middle and leave it without moving it during the meeting, because it doesn't go in front of everybody when it's down through the walkway there. I don't like this. I know some city councils do it. I don't know how they do it, but in Port Colborne, our staff sits ahead of us because our questions are to staff, not, I'm not talking to Rob or Stu, I'm talking to these guys. So if we can change that, that's all I
Duly
ask.
noted.
Thank you.
Any other business? Can you, the mic, turn the mic on, please?
I know, it should go to the podium. I just can't sit anymore. So anyways, 150 pages on our agenda for my budget is fine, but we are now going to have citizen appointees. We have citizen appointees on here. I'm going to recommend that we still deliver to the citizen appointees their agendas because they don't have the resources that we do with our office work for them to get their agendas.
The option was actually, it was emailed out and Grant asked if anyone would like a printed copy to let him know, and Grant actually delivered them in person, so kudos to
way
Grant.
To go, Grant.
But please be aware you can request a printed copy, but the process is first and foremost to email it out.
Thank you very much for that. That was number one. Number two, Gail and I talked about the numbering system on the agenda. We'll stay tuned. I dropped my agenda again. It was not pretty.
Member Metcalf.
Just one quick item, why we have, staff here. Is there a whistleblower policy in effect so that nobody is coerced or pressured into these positions or, I wouldn't say positions, but into compromising situations where they're signing things they don't feel comfortable with? I think there needs to be a whistleblower outlet to protect staff such as John and Misty back here and Darren, so that if they see improprieties going on, they can report them around that person without prejudice,
Fear of
without
losing their job.
reprisal.
Yeah. So we can maybe turn that over to staff for a recommendation to bring forward at the next meeting. Any other business? No. Okay. And if anyone wants to tell Chair Billsma how wonderful this meeting was run, I welcome you to do so. Okay, further revisions, hopefully to the last agenda item. All right. I will say I'm impressed with how collaborative everyone was on this very delicate issue. So good job, everyone. Okay, are we putting it up here as well? We don't need to? Okay. Member Johnson.
So what I did was, and thank you very much, Member Steele, for putting this together because it was a great framework. So what I did was I added the last whereas to explain about the levy review, and I changed the very first therefore be it resolved. And I still have one more wordsmithing to do, so bear with me. Therefore, be it resolved that the NPCA requests to the Niagara region that the 12 temporary members or the replacements' terms be extended until such time the appeal by the City of Hamilton is complete and the agreement between the three municipalities is finalized. That's what I'm asking for. And I think that's what we're all asking for, is that
So
they be
that's two
extended.
conditions you've stipulated, right?
Sorry?
You've stipulated two conditions. So
The second one is untouched, so it's further that the NPCA board direct staff to recommend a list of competencies modeled from and the wording is still the same. So the one, sorry? Okay, so the one change I'm making is, therefore be it resolved that the NPCA request to the Niagara region that the 12 temporary members, brackets, or their replacements, brackets, terms be extended until such
Terms.
time the appeal.
because they're terms.
Well, you told me to put on the microphone.
So-
Until such time.
I
So
just
that's-
want to point out that if the appeal by the city of Hamilton is finalized, but the three municipalities haven't
Then your
met.
term continues on
Okay.
until such time it is, so we're just following the wording of the whereases.
Okay.
That the levy is starting first, and then the finalization of the 3B agreed upon. So
Okay.
that's all it is just carrying that wording through.
Member Steele.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And again, I'm glad that Brenda had added this. I have no issue with it. I don't know if Rob doesn't have any issue. It's really to what we were talking about earlier. So I would accept it as amended and move on from there. So, or use this as our original motion.
Is
with a
there
little correction
any,
done.
is there any other discussion? So just, I didn't read this, but moved by Member Steele, seconded by Member Foster. All those in favor? Any opposed? Thank you, Brenda. Carried. All right. That was a major accomplishment. I'm really proud of us for that. What do we have left? Is there anything? There's a motion to adjourn, moved by Member Height, seconded by Member Wright, that the meeting of the Board of Directors of the Niagara Peninsula Conservation Authority be hereby adjourned at 1:20 p.m. Okay. All those in favor? Any opposed? Thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful day.